Welcome to His Kingdom Ways. I'm so glad you're here. Before we begin today's reading, I want to take a moment and give honor where honor's due. I honor our apostle and spiritual covering, Apostle Shane Vaughn, pastors Shane and Karen Vaughn, overseers of First Harvest Ministries International. I honor Bishop Kendrick and Mama Kendrick. I give honor to all the elders, ministers, and leaders of First Harvest Ministries International. As a minister of this ministry, it is a privilege and an honor to share this message with you. So, do you stone your children also? Answering the favorite gotcha of those who have never read the law, they mock. This is a teaching booklet by Reverend John Shane Vaughn with First Harvest Ministries International. You can find more at hiscomingkingdom.com. Introduction. The smug smile. You have seen it. If you keep Yahweh's commandments, if you honor his Sabbath, if you treat his Torah as the living instruction it has always been, then sooner or later you will meet the smile. It's a particular kind of smile, half pity, half triumph, the kind worn by someone who believes they are about to win an argument they have never actually studied. And out it comes, the line they think is a checkmate. Oh, so you keep the Torah. Then I guess you stone your rebellious children too. They lean back, they wait. They are certain they have just exposed the impossible contradiction at the heart of your faith. They believe they have caught you. They believe they have proven that the law of Yahweh is barbaric, primitive, and mercifully abolished by a kinder Messiah who came to fix his father's mistakes. There's only one problem. They are arguing about a passage they have not read, not carefully, not in full, not in the original, and not in context. They have inherited a soundbite, polished it into a weapon, and aimed it at people who have spent years on their knees in the very text that they are dismissing. And so, this little booklet exists for one reason: to answer the question honestly, thoroughly, and from the scripture itself, so that the next time the smile appears, you will not flinch. You will open the book. Let us read what the law actually says. Chapter 1, read it for yourself. Here is the passage in full, exactly as it stands. Do not skim it. Read every word, because every word matters. If a man has a stubborn and rebellious son who will not obey the voice of his father or the voice of his mother, and though they discipline him, he will not listen to them, then his father and mother shall take hold of him and bring him to the elders of the city, to the gate of the place where he lives. And they shall say to the elders, This son of ours is stubborn and rebellious. He will not obey our voice. He's a glutton and a drunkard. Then all the men of his city shall stone him to death. So you shall purge the evil from among you, and all Israel shall hear and fear. Deuteronomy 21:18-21. Now, read it again. If a man has a stubborn and rebellious son who will not obey the voice of his father or the voice of his mother, and though they discipline him, he will not listen to them, then his father and mother shall take hold of him and bring him to the elders of his city, to the gate of the place where he lives. They shall say to the elders, This son of ours is stubborn and rebellious. He will not obey our voice. He's a glutton and a drunkard. Then all the men of his city shall stone him to death. So you shall purge the evil from among you, and all Israel shall hear and fear. The popular caricature claims this verse hands a sword to angry parents and licenses them to murder a disobedient toddler. That image is not in the text. Anyone who has actually read the passage knows it. Let us examine what is truly written here, line by line, and watch the caricature collapse. Chapter 2, Parents do not hold the sword. The very first thing the careful reader notices is what the parents cannot do. They cannot carry out the sentence. They do not have the authority. The passage does not say the father takes his son into the field and kills him. It says the father and mother must take hold of him and bring him to the elders of his city, to the gate of the place where he lives. That single phrase demolishes the entire accusation. The city gate in ancient Israel was the courthouse. It was where the elders sat, where legal disputes were heard, where witnesses testified, and where judgment was rendered in the open before the community. To bring a matter to the gate was to submit it to public judicial process. It was the ancient equivalent of filing charges and standing trial. So watch what is actually required. The parents do not act as executioners. They act as accusers, and even then, only after every private remedy has failed. The case is heard publicly before the elders in the place of judgment. The accusation must be examined by the community. Only then, if found guilty under that scrutiny, is judgment rendered. This is not a license for rage. This is due process. It is the opposite of mob justice. It is a deliberate, public, accountable proceeding designed to restrain the very thing the mockers imagine it unleashes. The parents who bring this charge are themselves placed under examination, for they must testify openly and stake their own credibility on the truth of what they say. No parent acting out of mere temper would survive that gate. The character dies in the first 2 verses, but there is far more. Chapter 3. The law was built to prevent abuse, not enable it. If the modern critic actually wants to talk about how a Torah court worked, let's talk about it. Because the moment you examine the evidentiary structure of Yahweh's law, you discover that it was engineered deliberately and meticulously to make wrongful execution nearly impossible. Consider what the Torah required before any capital sentence could be carried out. 2 or 3 witnesses, never 1. On the evidence of 2 witnesses or of 3 witnesses, the one who is to die shall be put to death. A person shall not be put to death on the evidence of 1 witness. Deuteronomy 17:6. No accusation stood on a single voice. No private grudge, no solitary claim. No one person's word could send another to judgment. The testimony had to be corroborated independently by multiple witnesses examined before the court. The accuser bore the risk. What happened to a man who lied in that court? If a malicious witness arises to accuse a person of wrongdoing, and the judges inquire diligently, and if the witness is a false witness and has accused his brother falsely, then you shall do to him as he had meant to do to his brother. So you shall purge the evil from your midst. Deuteronomy 19:16-19. Read that carefully. The false accuser received the very penalty he sought to impose on his victim. A man bringing a capital charge was, in effect, placing his own life on the scale. That is not a system that invites abuse. That is a system that terrifies the abuser. The judges themselves were accountable. The court was charged to inquire diligently. Israel's judges were not rubber stamps. They were commanded to investigate, to cross-examine, to search out whether the charge was true. The whole apparatus was public, corporate, and answerable. Now place the rebellious son, law, back inside that structure. The parents do not execute, they accuse. Their accusation requires corroboration. The judges must inquire diligently. A false charge rebounds upon the accuser's own head. Every safeguard the Torah built into its capital system applies here too. This is the central truth the mocker never grasps. The law is structured to prevent abuse, not to enable it. The critic imagines a system rigged for cruelty. The text describes a system armored against it. I just want to pause and say, do you realize the accusations that you're bringing against the Father when you accuse such things or say that his law is despicable or his law was too hard for us to keep or burdensome? The accusations you're bringing against the very God you claim to serve. Please have eyes. open eyes, eyes to see and ears to hear. Pray for eyes to see and ears to hear. Okay, moving on. Chapter 4, what the Hebrew actually says. The accusation rests on a picture, a small child, stoned to death for ordinary childhood disobedience, refusing to clean his room, talking back, throwing a tantrum. That picture is not in the text. It cannot be once you read the Hebrew. Stubborn, soror. The son is first described with the Hebrew word sarer. It does not mean a momentary bad mood. It carries the sense of one who has turned aside, who persistently and deliberately refuses correction. This is not a single act of defiance. It is a settled direction of life, a course chosen and held to. Rebellious is mare. Next, he is called mare, describing someone openly defiant, resistant to all authority, not a child startled into disobedience, but a person who has made resistance his posture. He will not obey our voice, shema. The parents say he will not shema, he will not obey. The Hebrew verb here is shema, and it means far more than hearing sound. It means to listen, to heed, to obey. The grammar paints a picture of repeated correction met with continual refusal. This is not a first offense. This is a pattern established over time, resistant to every effort at discipline. A glutton and a drunkard, zalel and zalveh. And here comes the detail that ends the debate entirely. The parents describe their son as zalel, a glutton, and zalveh, a drunkard. Stop and consider that. These are not the words you use for a little boy who refused his supper. A glutton is one given over to habitual excess. A drunkard is one whose life is marked by intoxication. These describe a lifestyle, settled, habitual, chosen, indulged. Now, here is where we must be precise, because precision is what wins this argument. A critic may object, but the text never explicitly says he is an adult. That is true, and it does not matter. The Torah does not establish guilt here by counting years. It establishes it by describing behavior. The burden of proof in this passage is behavioral, not numerical. And the behaviors named, sustained drunkenness, habitual gluttony, an entrenched pattern of defiance unbroken by repeated discipline, presuppose a maturity and independence that no small child possesses. You do not need the text to print a birth certificate. The conduct itself testifies to who is standing before the elders. The figure described is not a toddler having a meltdown. It is a hardened, self-determining person who has made dissipation and rebellion the settled character of his life and has refused every correction offered him. The mocker's image of the murdered toddler simply is not there. It never was. It exists only in the imagination of those who never read past the word stoned. Chapter 5. Even the rabbis knew. Here is something the accuser almost never knows, and it is devastating to their case. The ancient Jewish sages, the very people closest to this text in language, culture, and time, did not read this passage the way the modern mocker does. They surrounded the law with so many legal safeguards, so many strict judicial conditions, that the Talmud famously concluded, "There never has been a stubborn and rebellious son, and there never will be." Read that again. There never has been a stubborn and rebellious son, and there never will be. The rabbis who lived inside this law, who guarded it and debated it for centuries, declared that the conditions were so exacting that the case had never actually occurred and never would. Now, you may agree with their conclusion, or you may not. That is not the point. The point is this: the people who knew this text most intimately did not understand it to mean that parents could execute disobedient children. They understood it as an exceptionally rare legal case wrapped in extraordinary judicial protections, a case so hedged about with requirements that it functioned more as a solemn warning than as a routine penalty. So when a modern critic waves this verse around as proof of Torah's barbarism, they are not only contradicting the careful reader of the Hebrew, they are contradicting the very tradition that preserved and transmitted the law for thousands of years. They have appointed themselves the foremost authority on a passage that the actual experts treated with reverence, caution, and awe. Chapter 6. Why the penalty was severe. Let us not soften what we have no right to soften. The penalty in this passage is death, and the text does not blush to say so. We should not blush either. Instead, we should understand it. The passage ends with the reason, "So you shall purge the evil from among you." That phrase is not unique to this passage. It echoes throughout Deuteronomy, attached to idolatry, to false witness, to sexual immorality, and to murder. And here it is attached to the son whose life has become defined by open, incorrigible, high-handed rebellion. The purpose stated is not cruelty. The purpose is the protection of the covenant community from the spread of evil. And here we must be honest about a truth our age desperately wants to deny. Sin is contagious. We all know it. We watch it happen. Ideas spread, immorality spreads, violence spreads, rebellion spreads. People are shaped by those around them, pulled by example, normalized by repetition. Look at any culture, including our own, and you will see how quickly a tolerated evil becomes a celebrated one, and how quickly a celebrated evil becomes a mandatory one. Israel's own history is the proof. Again and again, the nation tolerated idolatry. Again and again, it refused to remove those leading others into sin. And again, the corruption spread generation upon generation until entire eras of the covenant people collapsed into apostasy. The leniency that looked like mercy became the seedbed of national ruin. Yahweh was not indifferent to that reality. He saw the whole arc. He saw how one settled, defiant rebel, left unchecked at the center of a community, could leaven the entire lump. And so the law forces every reader to reckon with how seriously he regards persistent, high-handed rebellion and the corruption it carries. Does the penalty sound severe? It is supposed to. The severity is the sermon. It is meant to make us tremble at what rebellion truly is, to strip away the modern fantasy that defiance against the Most High is a small and private thing. It is not small. It never was. Chapter 7. The question ignores the covenant context. Now we arrive at the part the mocker never considers, the part that exposes how little thought went into the gotcha in the first place. The Torah was given as the civil law of a covenant nation living under Yahweh's direct rule. It was the constitution of a people in a land, with judges, with elders at the gates, with a temple, with a functioning judicial system ordained by Yahweh himself. We are not living in that nation. Today, the scattered tribes are dispersed among the nations, living under the civil governments of the countries where we reside. And that simple fact answers the question before it is even finished being asked. There are many commandments that cannot presently be carried out, not because they have been abolished, but because the biblical conditions for obeying them no longer exist. We have no temple, so we offer no sacrifices. We have no Levitical priesthood serving at an altar, so those functions wait. We have no Levitical judges sitting at the gates of Israel's cities, so we do not carry out Israel's national judicial penalties. Think of it this way: an American citizen may believe wholeheartedly in the rulings of the Supreme Court, but he cannot enforce one from his living room. He cannot summon a jury at his kitchen table, deputize himself, and carry out a sentence. The ruling is real. The authority to execute it belongs to a court. And the citizen has no mechanism to act, not because the law has vanished, but because he was never the one authorized to enforce it. So it is with the judicial penalties of Torah. They belong to Israel's courts, under Israel's appointed elders, in Israel's land, under Israel's covenant government. They were never handed to private individuals at all. This is not a loophole. It is the plain structure of the law itself. Take away that system and the penalties have no lawful mechanism, because the law itself never authorized private individuals to carry them out. It authorized the elders at the gate. So hear this plainly, in case anyone is genuinely confused rather than merely mocking. No Torah-observant believer is advocating that any individual take the law into their own hands. To do so would itself violate the Torah, which demands due process, multiple witnesses, judicial examination, and lawful authority. The believer who honors the law honors all of it, including the parts that forbid vigilante action. The very law the critic imagines we would abuse is the law that forbids the abuse. The gotcha collapses because it was built on a misunderstanding of what the law is and where it operates. It imagines that keeping Torah means privately enforcing the national penalties of an ancient theocracy in your own living room. No one believes that. No one teaches that. The question answers itself the moment you understand the covenant context in which those laws were given. Chapter 8, But Jesus, answering the pivot. Here is where the honest critic and even the sincere believer will turn. The moment Deuteronomy is explained, the conversation jumps tracks. But didn't Jesus do away with all that? Turn the other cheek, let the woman go. You are stuck in the Old Testament. This is the real heart of the matter, and it deserves a straight answer. First, what fulfill actually means. Yahshua said it plainly: do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. Matthew 5:17. The critic reads fulfill as finish and discard, as though he came to complete a task that could now be thrown away. But the Greek word plerose, to fill full, to bring to its complete and intended meaning, to fill up to the brim, it is the opposite of abolish, and he says so in the very same breath. He did not come to empty the law of authority. He came to fill it with its full meaning and to embody it perfectly. The man who fills a cup has not destroyed the cup. He has finally filled it as it was meant to be filled. Second, personal ethics are not civil judicial authority. When Yahshua taught turn the other cheek in Matthew 5:38-39, he was addressing personal conduct, how you, as an individual, respond to personal insult and injury. He was not abolishing the courts. He was forbidding private vengeance. And notice, that is exactly the same principle that governs the rebellious son. The Torah never permitted the wronged individual to take vengeance into his own hands. It sent the matter to the elders at the gate. Turn the other cheek and bring him to the elders are not in conflict. They are the same principle from two directions. Personal grievance is surrendered, not privately avenged, and justice is left to the lawful authority. Yahshua was reinforcing the very structure the mocker thinks he destroyed. Third, John 8, and the woman caught in adultery. This is the critic's favorite proof text, and it proves the opposite of what they think. Look closely at the scene. Yahshua was not seated as a judge in a Torah court. He was standing in the temple court being baited by men who had no intention of holding a lawful trial, and their case was lawless from the start. Where were the 2 or 3 witnesses? Where was the man who under the law bore equal guilt and equal sentence? Where was the diligent inquiry? This was not a Torah proceeding, it was a trap, using a woman as bait, conducted by men who had already shredded the Torah's own evidentiary requirements. When Yahshua said, "Let him who is without sin among you be the first to throw a stone," he was not overturning the law. He was exposing a mob that had no lawful standing to invoke it. He upheld the Torah's demand for righteous witnesses by confronting men who were not righteous witnesses at all. And then he told her, "Go, and from now on sin no more." He did not bless the sin, he released the trap and called her to repentance. So the pivot fails. Yahshua did not contradict his Father's law. He filled it full. He forbade private vengeance exactly as the law always had. And in John 8, he defended the law's own standards against men who were trampling them. The "but Jesus" objection, examined honestly, lands the critic right back where they started. Chapter 9, a word to those who mock. I want to speak now not to the Torah keeper, but to the brother or sister who has used this line, perhaps without ever realizing what they were saying. What concerns me most is not that the question is poorly reasoned, though it is. What concerns me is the posture behind it, the casual ease with which so many believers mock the commandments of Yahweh without ever having studied them. Well, thank goodness we don't have to do that barbaric law anymore. Be careful. Be very careful. Do you hear what such a statement implies? It suggests that you believe Yahweh's judgments were cruel, irrational, or morally inferior. Right up until the Messiah arrived to correct his Father's primitive ways. It paints the Most High as a barbarian whom his own Son had to civilize. You're accusing the Father. The loving Father who sent his Son that paid your penalty. You're accusing him. But consider this. Yahshua never once apologized for his Father's law. He never called it cruel. He never called it barbaric. He upheld it. He honored it. He lived it perfectly. And neither should we apologize for what he never apologized for. And here is the part that should sober every scoffer. When Yahshua returns, he will return as a judge. At his second coming, he will execute judgment upon a vast multitude of the wicked. He will arrive keeping his Father's law, enforcing its righteous standards, purging evil from the earth on a scale that dwarfs anything in Deuteronomy. And not one of us would dare stand before him and call him barbaric for it. Not one of us would mock the King of Glory for honoring the Torah he came to fulfill. So why, then, why would you mock your brother or sister for revering that same law, for imitating Messiah? When you sneer at his commandments, you are not merely insulting the people who keep them. You are speaking against the lawgiver himself, against the Messiah who will one day enforce every righteous decree. Tread softly. The ground you mock is holy ground. Conclusion. His law reveals his heart. So let us answer the question one final time plainly. No, we do not stone our children. We never have. We never could. The law itself forbids private individuals from carrying out judicial penalties, demands 2 or 3 witnesses, turns the false accuser's charge back upon his own head, describes not a small child but a grown and incorrigible rebel, and belongs to a covenant judicial system that does not presently operate. The gotcha was never a gotcha at all. It was a confession of ignorance dressed up as a clever objection. But I want to leave you with something larger than a rebuttal. When you actually study Yahweh's law, when you sit with the Hebrew and the context and the covenant and the heart behind it, you discover something the mockers never will. You discover that his law reveals him, his justice, his love, his wisdom, his compassion, his perfect foresight, his holiness. And you discover that the Apostle John told the truth when he wrote, "For this is the love of Yahweh, that we keep his commandments, and his commandments are not burdensome." 1 John 5:3. Not burdensome. That is not my opinion offered against the critics. It is the testimony of Scripture itself. The law is not a weight laid upon us to crush us. It is a window into the very heart of the Father, teaching us his ways so that we might walk in them and become like him. And if you do not truly know it, you have no business speaking as though you stand above it. Because to hate, mock, and slander his ways is to hate, mock, and slander him. So the next time the smile appears and the line comes, "So, do you stone your children too?" do not flinch. Smile back and open the book. Quick answers for the conversation itself. Keep these close when the question comes, and it will. Here are the short, clean replies. Do Torah observant believers stone children today? No. Never have, never could. The law forbids private individuals from carrying out any judicial penalty. Who was authorized to carry out judgment? The elders and judges of the city at the gate, in open court, never the parents, and never any private person. Was this about a small child or a toddler? No. The text describes habitual drunkenness, settled gluttony, and an entrenched pattern of defiance that survived repeated discipline. The burden is behavioral, not numerical. The conduct describes a hardened, self-determining person, not a child throwing a tantrum. What protections did the law require before any execution? 2 or 3 corroborating witnesses in Deuteronomy 17:6, diligent judicial inquiry, and a penalty that fell back on any false accuser's own head. Deuteronomy 19:16-19. The system was built to prevent abuse, not enable it. Who do you think your father is? Does this apply outside ancient Israel? No. These were the civil penalties of a covenant nation with its own courts and land, scattered among the nations with no temple and no Levitical court. There is no lawful mechanism to apply them, and the law never gave one to private individuals. Didn't Jesus abolish all this? No. He said he came to fill the law full, not abolish it. Matthew 5:17. Turn the other cheek forbids private vengeance, exactly what the law always required. And in John 8, he was not a seated judge. He exposed a mob that had ignored the law's own witness requirements. And in case you forgot, Yahshua will be keeping his Father's law upon his arrival. None of us would dare call him barbaric for it. So why would we say it of his word or of his people? Shalom.